The clink of glasses and murmur of voices filled the dimly lit space of Velvet Hour, the upscale cocktail bar where I'd been working for the past 8 months. My fingers ached from shaking martinis all evening, and a dull throb had settled behind my right temple. 3 more hours until closing. 3 more hours until I could kick off these tortuous heels and collapse into my shabby apartment bed. "Lily, table 7 needs attention," Marco, my manager, muttered as he passed behind me, his cologne leaving a trail of sandalwood and something synthetic. I nodded, grabbing a small black serving tray and napkins. Table 7 sat in the corner, our most private booth, shrouded in shadows despite the ambient lighting that cast everything else in a soft, amber glow. Reserved for VIPs only. I hadn't seen anyone arrive, but that wasn't unusual. The wealthy clientele who frequented Velvet Hour often entered through the private entrance in the back alley. My breath caught as I approached. Even before I could make out his features, something about his presence made the air feel charged, as if the molecules around him vibrated at a different frequency. He sat alone, though the booth could accommodate 6. One hand rested on the polished mahogany table, long fingers adorned with a single platinum ring. His suit was charcoal gray, so perfectly tailored it seemed to have been created by sculptor's hands rather than a tailor's. "Good evening, sir," I said, the practiced words coming out softer than I intended. "Welcome to Velvet Hour." When he looked up, I nearly dropped my tray. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, amber with flecks of gold, and they held mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. He couldn't have been more than 35, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair cut close at the sides but longer on top. A scar, thin as a paper cut, traced the line of his jaw. "Scotch. Neat. Whatever's most expensive," he said, his voice low and smooth like river stones. He didn't blink as he studied me, and I had the disconcerting feeling he was memorizing my face. "Yes, sir. Right away." I turned quickly, heart hammering against my ribs. At the bar, Marco was watching me, his expression tense. "Everything okay?" he asked, already reaching for the top-shelf Macallan. "Fine," I said, though fine felt like the wrong word. "Who is that? In booth 7? Marco's eyes darted toward the corner, then back to me. "Nobody you need to worry about. Just serve him quickly and don't linger." But as I carried the amber liquid back to the table, I couldn't help but wonder who this man was that had my usually unflappable manager looking so nervous. The stranger's gaze followed my approach, and when I set down his drink, his fingers brushed mine deliberately. "Thank you." His eyes dropped to my name tag. "Lily." The way he said my name made it sound like he was tasting it, and a shiver ran up my spine. I should have walked away then, should have returned to the safety behind the bar, but something held me there, like a moth hovering too close to a flame. "Will there be anything else, sir?" I managed. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not at the moment." I nodded and backed away, feeling his eyes on me even as I returned to my station. Throughout the next hour, I felt his gaze tracking me as I moved around the bar, mixing drinks, serving customers. Each time I glanced toward his corner, he was watching me, that expensive scotch barely touched. Then they arrived. 3 men in dark suits entered through the main door, scanning the room with practiced efficiency. They weren't our usual clientele, too rigid in their posture, too alert. One touched his ear, and I noticed the nearly invisible wire of an earpiece. Marco tensed beside me. "Shit," he whispered. Then louder to me, "Take your break. Now," but I couldn't move. Because one of the men had spotted the lone figure in the corner booth, and his hand was moving toward his jacket. The movement was subtle, but unmistakable to anyone who had grown up in my neighborhood. Without thinking, I grabbed a napkin and a pen. My hands trembled as I scrawled the words, "They know you're here. Run." Then I poured another scotch, placed the napkin beneath it, and moved toward table 7. The man's eyes narrowed slightly as I approached, sensing something was wrong. I set down the fresh drink, sliding the napkin directly in front of him, my body positioned to block the view from the entrance. "On the house," I said, my voice barely audible. His eyes dropped to the napkin, then back to my face. Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe, before it settled back into that controlled mask. He nodded once, imperceptibly, and his hand closed around the napkin. "Thank you, Lily," he said again, But this time there was something else in his voice. A question, perhaps. Or a warning. I returned to the bar, my heart in my throat. The three men were moving now, weaving between tables with purpose. But when they reached booth 7, it was empty. My mystery man had vanished as if he'd never been there at all. Only the untouched scotch remained. The napkin gone. The tallest of the three men approached the bar, his face a carefully constructed blank. "The man who was sitting there," he said, nodding toward the booth. "Where did he go?" Marco stepped forward before I could speak. "Restroom, maybe. I wasn't paying attention." The man's cold eyes shifted to me. "And you? Did you see where he went?" I felt Marco's warning look, but something made me lift my chin and meet the stranger's gaze. "Sorry. I've been busy with other customers." A lie. My first of many where this man was concerned. The three men swept through the bar, checking the restrooms, the kitchen, every possible exit. But of course, they didn't find him. I knew, somehow, that he wasn't a man who got caught unless he wanted to be. When they finally left, Marco pulled me aside, his fingers digging into my arm. "What did you do?" he hissed. "Nothing. I just served him a drink." Marco's eyes narrowed. "Listen to me, Lily. That man is Alexander Volkov. He owns half this city and not the legal half. If you did anything to help him, those men will be back. And they won't be asking questions next time." Alexander Volkov. The name sent an electric current down my spine. Even I had heard whispers of the Volkov family, the Russian syndicate that had emerged as the dominant force in our city's underworld over the past 5 years. They dealt in everything: drugs, weapons, human trafficking, and they left bodies in their wake. "I didn't do anything," I repeated, but my voice lacked conviction. Marco sighed. "Go home. You're done for tonight." "But my shift is over. Go. And Lily, be careful getting home." The night air hit me like a slap as I exited through the employee door into the back alley. Rain had started to fall, fine droplets that clung to my hair and eyelashes. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around my shoulders and fumbled for my phone, thinking I'd call a rideshare instead of taking the bus. That's when I heard it, the soft purr of an expensive engine. A black Bentley idled at the end of the alley, its headlights off, windows tinted to obscurity. For a long moment, I stood frozen, water seeping into my shoes. Then the back door opened. "Get in, Lily." That same voice, smooth as polished stone. Every instinct screamed at me to run in the opposite direction. But where would I go? Back into the bar where Marco had already made it clear I wasn't welcome tonight? To my apartment, where I lived alone with a flimsy lock on the door? And if the men in suits were federal agents, as I suspected, wouldn't they be watching my place already? So I stepped forward, drawn by some force I couldn't name, until I stood beside the open door. Alexander Volkov sat inside, his face half hidden in shadow. Behind him, I could make out the silhouette of another man in the driver's seat. "Why would I get in your car?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Because you've just made yourself a target by helping me," he said simply. "And because you're curious." He wasn't wrong. Beneath my fear, curiosity burned like a hot coal. Why had I helped him? A stranger, a criminal, a man who radiated danger like heat. "I don't even know you," I said. "But you will." He shifted slightly, and the interior light caught the gleam of his eyes. "They'll be watching your apartment tonight, your workplace tomorrow, your friends, your family." My stomach dropped. My younger sister, Mia, living in the dorms across town. My mother in her nursing home. Would they really go after them because of a napkin? "Who are they?" I asked. "FBI. Special task force created specifically to bring down my organization." He said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "Get in, Lily. I don't like the rain." I should have walked away, should have taken my chances. But in that moment, standing in the rain with my feet aching and fear crawling up my spine, I made a choice that would alter the course of my life forever. I got in. The door closed with a soft thud that felt like the period at the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The interior smelled of leather and something spicy. His cologne, I realized. Up close, He was even more striking, all sharp angles and controlled power. "Drive, Victor," he said to the man in front, then turned to me. "You're shivering." Before I could respond, he shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. The warmth of his body lingered in the fabric, and it was heavier than I expected, weighted down by something in the inner pocket that I didn't want to identify. "I should thank you," he said, his eyes never leaving my face. "Not many people would risk themselves for a stranger." "I didn't do it for you," I said, finding a spark of defiance. "Those men, they had guns. I didn't want violence in our bar." A smile curved his lips, revealing a dimple in his left cheek that softened his face unexpectedly. "A humanitarian, then. Where are you taking me?" I asked as the car smoothly navigated the rain-slicked streets, moving away from the familiar grid of downtown toward the waterfront. Somewhere safe. "Safe for whom?" His smile widened, revealing white teeth. "You ask good questions, Lily." He paused. "What's your last name?" "Chen," I said, then immediately regretted giving him that piece of myself. "Lily Chen." He tested the name, much as he had with my first name earlier. "Beautiful. Like the flower." The car turned onto a private drive that wound up toward a modern glass and steel structure perched on the cliffside, overlooking the bay. Security gates parted silently for us, and armed men stood at attention as we passed. "This is your house?" I asked, unable to keep the awe from my voice. "One of them." The car stopped at the entrance, where more men in suits waited under the shelter of a modernist portico. One opened my door, his eyes carefully averted as I stepped out, still wearing Alexander's jacket. "Welcome to my home, Lily Chen," Alexander said, suddenly beside me, his hand at the small of my back as he guided me inside. "I suspect we have much to discuss." The foyer opened into a vast living area, all sleek lines and minimalist furnishings, with floor-to-ceiling windows that would have offered spectacular views of the bay in daylight. Now they reflected only our silhouettes against the night. "Are you hungry?" he asked, moving to a bar cart that held an array of crystal decanters. I shook my head, though I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten. "I want to know what's going on. Why were those men looking for you? Why did you bring me here? When can I go home?" He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, handed one to me, then took a seat on a white leather sofa, gesturing for me to join him. I remained standing. "Those men," he said, swirling his drink, "are part of a joint task force that's been trying to build a case against me for the past year. Someone tipped them off about my meeting tonight." His eyes narrowed. "Someone who will regret that decision." A chill ran through me. "And me? Why am I here?" "You warned me. That makes you either an ally or a liability." He took a sip of his drink, studying me over the rim of his glass. "I haven't decided which yet." The implication hung in the air between us. If he decided I was a liability... "I'm nobody," I said quickly. "A bartender. I don't know anything about you or your business. I just didn't want to see someone get hurt." "Nobody," he repeated thoughtfully. "I disagree. You're someone who acts on instinct. Someone brave, someone who sees more than they let on." He set down his glass. "And now you're someone who's seen my face, my home, and has a name to put to both. That makes you very much somebody, Lily Chen." I slept fitfully in a guest bedroom, larger than my entire apartment, haunted by dreams of men in dark suits and amber eyes watching me from shadows. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating unfamiliar surroundings. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came rushing back: the napkin, the warning, the rain-slicked ride to this cliffside fortress. A soft knock at the door made me bolt upright. I was still wearing my clothes from the night before, though someone had removed my shoes. "Come in," I called, my voice hoarse with sleep. A young woman entered, carrying a tray. She couldn't have been more than 20, with pale blonde hair pulled into a severe bun and watchful blue eyes. She wore a simple black dress that looked expensive despite its plainness. "Mr. Volkov asked me to bring you breakfast," she said, setting the tray on a sleek console table by the window. "And these." She gestured to a stack of neatly folded clothes beside a shoebox. "He thought you might want to freshen up." "Thank you," I said, sliding out of bed. "I'm Lily." She nodded once, her expression carefully blank. "I know who you are. I'm Irina, Mr. Volkov's assistant." Is he here?" I asked, approaching the tray where steam rose from a carafe of what smelled like freshly brewed coffee. "He had business to attend to this morning. He'll return this afternoon." Irina moved to the door, then hesitated. "The bathroom is through there. You'll find everything you need. Mr. Volkov has also instructed me to show you around once you're ready, for security purposes." Security purposes. The phrase sent a shiver down my spine. Was I a guest or a prisoner? "When can I go home?" I asked. The question that had been gnawing at me since I'd gotten into that black Bentley. Something flickered across Irina's face. Pity, perhaps. That's for Mr. Volkov to decide. She closed the door softly behind her. I sank onto the edge of the bed, mind racing. I needed to call my sister, check on my mother, let my roommate know I was okay. But my phone was dead, and I didn't see a charger anywhere. I was cut off, isolated in this beautiful prison with its panoramic views and silent staff. The coffee was perfect, rich and fragrant, accompanied by pastries still warm from the oven. The clothes fit as if they'd been made for me. Dark jeans, a soft cashmere sweater and a deep emerald that complemented my skin tone, and leather ankle boots that were both stylish and comfortable. How had he known my size? The thought made me uneasy, but I pushed it aside as I stepped into the ensuite bathroom. It was a shrine to luxury, marble and glass with a rainfall shower, and a soaking tub positioned to take advantage of the ocean view. I showered quickly, using the expensive products that smelled of jasmine and vanilla, then dressed in the provided clothes, leaving my bartender uniform folded on the bed. Irina was waiting in the hallway, her posture rigid. "This way, please." She led me through the modernist mansion, pointing out rooms as we passed. A home theater, a gym, a library filled with leather-bound volumes. Every space was immaculate, designed with the same minimalist aesthetic, but there were no personal touches, no photographs or mementos. It felt more like a high-end hotel than a home. "How long have you worked for Mr. Volkov?" I asked as we descended a floating staircase to the main floor. 3 years, she replied without elaboration. "And what exactly does he do?" I ventured. Irina stopped, turning to face me with a look that was both warning and appraisal. "Mr. Volkov has many business interests, import-export, real estate, nightlife. It's not my place to discuss them." She hesitated. "And if I were you, I wouldn't ask him either." We continued the tour in silence. The lower level opened onto a terrace with an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. 2 men in suits stood at opposite ends of the property, their attention focused outward. Guards, not guests. "Am I allowed outside?" I asked, gesturing to the terrace. "The grounds are secure. You may use the pool and gardens, but don't approach the perimeter fencing. The security team has been instructed to intervene." The word hung in the air between us. I swallowed hard. "And if I want to leave?" Irina's expression softened slightly. "You cannot leave without Mr. Volkov's permission, for your safety as much as his." "That's kidnapping," I said, a flare of anger cutting through my fear. "Is it? You got into his car willingly. You came to his home without resistance." She studied me. "Besides, where would you go? The FBI is watching your apartment, your workplace. They've already questioned your roommate." My stomach dropped. "How do you know that?" "Mr. Volkov has sources. Your roommate told them you sometimes stay with a friend after late shifts. They'll be back, but for now they're not overly concerned." She paused. "Your sister is safe at her university. Your mother's nursing home has been under surveillance since 8 a.m. The casual way she mentioned my family made my blood run cold. "If he hurts them, Mr. Volkov has no interest in your family," Irina cut in. "He's merely monitoring the situation. The FBI's interest in you will fade if they find nothing suspicious. And how long will that take?" "That depends on how valuable you prove to be." Before I could ask what she meant, the distant sound of a car engine caught our attention. Irina checked her watch, her posture straightening. "Mr. Volkov has returned earlier than expected. Come." We returned to the main level, just as Alexander Volkov strode through the front door, flanked by two men I recognized from the previous night. His presence immediately filled the space, commanding attention without effort. He'd changed into a different suit, navy blue this time, with a subtle pattern that caught the light as he moved. His eyes found mine immediately, and something in his expression shifted. "Lily, you look rested." His gaze traveled over the clothes he'd provided, lingering in a way that made heat rise to my cheeks despite my fear. "Mr. Volkov," I acknowledged, lifting my chin. "When can I go home?" A smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Direct. I like that." He turned to Irina. "Have the chef prepare lunch for 2 on the West Terrace. We'll join shortly." Irina nodded and disappeared, leaving me alone with Alexander and his silent guards. "Walk with me," he said, extending his hand toward a hallway I hadn't explored with Irina. I hesitated, then followed without taking his offered hand. He dropped it smoothly, as if my refusal was of no consequence, and led me down a corridor lined with what appeared to be original artwork, modern pieces with bold splashes of color that stood out against the otherwise monochromatic decor. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice casual, as if we were old friends rather than captor and captive. "As well as can be expected when you've been kidnapped," I replied. He chuckled, the sound surprisingly warm. "You're not a prisoner, Lily." "Really?" "Because your assistant made it very clear I can't leave." We reached the end of the hall where double doors opened into a study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls, while the third was glass, offering another spectacular view of the ocean. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface clear except for a laptop and a crystal tumbler half filled with amber liquid. Alexander closed the door behind us and moved to lean against the desk. "Sit, please," he said, gesturing to one of 2 leather chairs facing the desk. I remained standing. "I want to go home, and you will, when it's safe." He crossed his arms, studying me. "You've put yourself in a precarious position, Lily Chen. The FBI now believes you're connected to me. They've traced your background, interviewed your associates. They know about your sister at Berkeley, your mother in Sunny Oaks Care Center. They're building a profile." My heart raced. "Because of a napkin? That's insane. Because you disappeared the same night I did. Because Marco told them you left abruptly after I did. Because..." He pushed away from the desk, moving toward me with fluid grace. "You're interesting. A bartender with no criminal record, no apparent connection to my world, who nevertheless warned a known criminal of danger. That makes them curious. And curiosity can be dangerous." He was standing too close now, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the flecks of darker amber in his eyes. I took a step back. "So what happens now?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. "Now we wait. My people are feeding misinformation through channels the FBI monitors. In a few days, they'll believe you were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a naive bartender who didn't recognize the dangerous man she was serving." His lips curved. "Then you can return to your life." Just like that? Just like that. But there was something in his eyes that made me doubt it would be so simple. "And what do you want from me in return?" His smile widened. "Smart girl." Always looking for the catch, he returned to his desk, opened a drawer, and removed a file folder. "I did some research on you, Lily Chen. 26 years old. Parents immigrated from Taiwan before you were born. Father died when you were 14. Car accident. Mother suffered a stroke 3 years ago and requires full-time care. You dropped out of nursing school to support her and your sister." He closed the file. "You work 2 jobs to make ends meet. The bar 4 nights a week, and a coffee shop 3 mornings. You're drowning in medical bills and student loans." Each fact landed like a physical blow. He'd stripped away my privacy, laid bare the struggles I'd worked so hard to hide behind a smile as I served drinks to people who spent more on a night out than I made in a month. "What do you want?" I repeated, my voice barely audible. Alexander studied me for a long moment. "Company for now. You intrigue me, Lily. A woman with nothing risking everything for a stranger." He moved around the desk, closing the distance between us again. "I want to know why you wrote that warning. Why you got into my car. Why you're standing here now, afraid but defiant, instead of begging for your freedom. I'm not going to beg, I said, meeting his gaze despite the fear coursing through me. Something flickered in his eyes, approval, perhaps, or hunger. No, I don't imagine you would. He glanced at his watch. Lunch should be ready, shall we? He didn't wait for my answer, simply placed his hand at the small of my back and guided me from the study. His touch was light but firm, a reminder of his control over the situation. Over me. The west terrace was smaller than the main one, more intimate, with a table set for two beneath a pergola draped with wisteria. The ocean stretched to the horizon, sunlight dancing on the waves. Under different circumstances, it would have been breathtaking. Wine? Alexander asked, as a silent server appeared with a bottle. No, thank you. He nodded to the server, who filled only one glass before disappearing back into the house. We were alone again, separated by a table set with china so delicate it looked like it might shatter if I breathed too hard. You must have questions, Alexander said, watching me over the rim of his wineglass. I had hundreds, but settled on the most pressing. Those men last night, were they really FBI? Yes. Part of an organized crime task force that's been trying to build a case against me for years. He said it casually, as if discussing a minor inconvenience rather than federal investigation. And are they right to? I challenged. Are you the criminal they think you are? His smile was slow, dangerous. What do you think? I think innocent men don't have armed guards and security perimeters. They don't kidnap bartenders who help them. Protected, not kidnapped, he corrected. And yes, I've broken laws. Many of them. I've built an empire in a world where weakness means death. He leaned forward slightly. But I have my own code, Lily, my own sense of justice. Is that how you justify it? I asked, picking at the salad that had appeared before me. Having a code? I don't justify anything. I simply am what circumstances have made me. He studied me thoughtfully. What would you do, I wonder, if your mother's care wasn't covered, if your sister had to drop out of university because you couldn't afford her tuition? My fork clattered against the plate. Don't. I'm merely asking a question. We all have lines we say we won't cross, until necessity forces our hand. He took another sip of wine. Your father wasn't merely a victim of a car accident, was he? He was driving home from his second job when he fell asleep at the wheel, working himself to death to provide for his family. Tears pricked at my eyes. How do you know that? I make it my business to know everything about people who interest me. He set down his glass. I could help you, Lily. Your mother could have the best private care. Your sister could finish her education without the burden of debt. You could complete your nursing degree. In exchange for what? I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. His eyes held mine. We'll discuss that when the time comes. The days at Alexander's mansion blended together in a haze of luxury and uncertainty. 3 days became 5, then a week. Each morning I woke hoping it would be the day I could return to my normal life, and each night I fell asleep in that too-soft bed, still caught in his gilded cage. Alexander himself was an enigma, absent for long stretches, then suddenly appearing at my side as I walked the grounds, or sat reading in the library. He never touched me inappropriately, never threatened me directly, but his presence was always charged with unspoken tension. He asked me endless questions about my life, my thoughts, my dreams, as if cataloging every piece of me for some future use. On the 8th day, I was sitting by the infinity pool, my feet dangling in the water as I stared at the horizon, when his shadow fell across me. You look melancholy today, he said, lowering himself to sit beside me. He was dressed more casually than I'd seen before, dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that softened his usual intimidating appearance. I miss my family, I admitted, watching ripples spread from my feet. My sister will be worried, and my mother. I swallowed hard. She gets confused easily. She might not understand why I haven't visited. Alexander was quiet for a moment. Your sister has been told you're taking a short-notice vacation with a friend. As for your mother, I've arranged for a private nurse to visit her daily, in addition to the care she already receives. I turned to him, startled. You did what? The nurse reports that she's doing well. Her physical therapy is progressing and she seems content. A complex mix of emotions surged through me, gratitude tangled with anger at his presumption. relief shadowed by deeper unease at how easily he had inserted himself into the most intimate parts of my life. "You had no right," I said, but there was no real heat in my words. "Perhaps not," he conceded. "But I had the means." I pulled my feet from the water, tucking them beneath me. "Why are you doing all this? The clothes, the luxury, the care for my mother. What do you want from me?" His amber eyes studied me with that same intensity that had unsettled me from the first moment at the bar. "Has it occurred to you that I might simply enjoy your company?" "No," I said flatly. "Men like you don't do things without expecting a return on investment." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Men like me? Powerful. Dangerous." I hesitated. "Criminal. And yet you warned me that night. You got into my car." His voice dropped lower. "Why did you do that, Lily?" The truth this time. The question had haunted me for days. Why had I risked everything for a stranger? A criminal, by his own admission. I stared out at the ocean, searching for an answer that made sense. "I don't know," I finally said. "It was instinct. I saw those men, saw the way the one reached inside his jacket, and I just reacted." "You have good instincts," he said softly. "They've served me well." A chill ran down my spine despite the warm sun. "When can I go home, Alexander? Really go home, not just promises." He was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. Then he sighed. A surprisingly human sound from someone who seemed more than human in many ways. "Tomorrow," he said. "My sources indicate the FBI has moved on to more pressing targets. They've classified you as a non-entity in their investigation." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by a confusing pang of, what? Disappointment? The thought was so absurd I pushed it away. "Thank you," I said, the words inadequate for the tangle of emotions inside me. "But I have a proposition for you first." He shifted to face me fully, his expression suddenly serious. "A job offer of sorts," I tensed. "I'm not going to work for your organization," he laughed, the sound surprisingly genuine. "I'm not asking you to become a criminal, Lily. I'm offering you a legitimate position. I own several businesses in the city, including a high-end private club called the Ivory Room. We need a new bar manager. The hours are reasonable, the pay is excellent, and you'd have full benefits, including health insurance that would cover your mother's care." I stared at him, waiting for the catch. "Why would you offer me that?" "Because you're qualified, because I trust you, and because—" His eyes held mine. "I'm not ready to never see you again." The intensity of his gaze made something flutter in my chest. "I don't know anything about managing a bar." "You know more than you think, and you'd have support, training." He reached out, his fingers brushing my hand so lightly I might have imagined it. "Say yes, Lily." I should have refused, should have demanded to be taken home and never look back. But the thought of returning to my old life, the crushing debt, the endless shifts, the worry about my mother's care, made my resolve waver. "I need to think about it," I said finally. He nodded once, as if he'd expected nothing less. "Of course. You have until tomorrow to decide." He stood in one fluid motion. "In the meantime, I thought you might want this." He pulled something from his pocket and handed it to me. My phone. "Fully charged. Your sister has texted several times. Your roommate as well." He hesitated. "I've had my people ensure it's secure, but I'd advise against mentioning me or your time here." I clutched the phone, overwhelmed by this small piece of my normal life returned to me. "Thank you." He studied me for another moment, then turned and walked back toward the house, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my restored connection to the world. I spent hours texting with my sister and roommate, crafting careful half-truths about a spontaneous trip with an old friend. I called the nursing home to check on my mother, relieved to hear she was doing well, better than usual according to the staff, thanks to the extra attention from the mysterious private nurse Alexander had arranged. That evening, I was summoned to dinner in the formal dining room, a space we hadn't used during my stay. I found Alexander waiting at the head of a table set for two with candles and fresh flowers. He rose as I entered, his eyes taking in the dress I'd chosen from the wardrobe he'd provided. A simple black sheath that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. "You look beautiful," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "Thank you," I murmured, taking my seat as a server appeared with wine. This time, I accepted a glass, needing its calming effect. "Have you thought about my offer?" Alexander asked after the first course had been served, a delicate seafood appetizer I barely tasted. "I have questions," I said, setting down my fork. "This club, is it legitimate? No illegal activities?" "The Ivory Room is completely legitimate. Private membership, high-end clientele, politicians, celebrities, business leaders." He took a sip of wine. "What happens in my other businesses is separate. And I wouldn't be expected to participate in those other businesses?" His eyes darkened. "I would never ask that of you, Lily." "Why me? There must be dozens of experienced bar managers in the city." He considered me for a long moment. "Because you see me. What does that mean? Most people see only what they expect. A dangerous man, a criminal, someone to fear or use or avoid. You saw beyond that from the first moment." His voice lowered. "You warned me without knowing who I was. You've been in my home for over a week, and not once have you tried to manipulate me or curry favor. You challenge me. You're refreshing." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. For all his power and danger, there was something almost vulnerable in his admission. "If I accept," I said carefully, "I want something in return." His eyebrow rose slightly. "Name it." "My life stays separate. No one follows me, monitors me, or interferes with my family. I work at your club, nothing more." "Agreed, with one condition." His eyes held mine. "You allow me to provide security for you and your family. Discreet, but present." "Why would I need security?" "Because you'll be associated with me, however peripherally. That creates risk." His expression hardened. "I protect what's mine, Lily." The possessive edge to his words sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm not yours." Something flickered in his eyes, a heat that made my breath catch. "Perhaps not, but you will be under my protection." Before I could respond, the doors to the dining room burst open. Victor, Alexander's driver and apparent right-hand man, strode in, his face tight with tension. "Sir, we have a situation," he said in a heavy accent, his eyes flicking briefly to me. Alexander's posture changed instantly, the brief vulnerability I'd glimpsed vanishing behind a mask of cold authority. "Excuse me, Lily," he said, rising smoothly. "Enjoy your dinner. I'll return shortly." But he didn't return. I finished my meal alone, then retreated to my room, more confused than ever about the decision I faced. Part of me knew accepting his offer would bind me to him in ways I couldn't fully understand. Yet another part, a part I was reluctant to acknowledge, was drawn to him, to his intensity, and the glimpses of something more complex beneath his dangerous exterior. I was still awake at midnight when a soft knock came at my door. Alexander stood in the hallway, his face drawn with tension, the perfect suit from dinner replaced with a black turtleneck and pants. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice rough with what sounded like exhaustion. I hesitated, then stepped back, allowing him into my temporary domain. He moved to the window, staring out at the moonlit ocean. "I apologize for leaving dinner," he said after a moment. "Business required my attention. Is everything okay?" I asked, surprised by my own concern. He turned, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You ask that as if you care." "Maybe I do," I admitted, surprising myself further. Something shifted in his expression. "There's been a complication with your return tomorrow." My heart sank. "What kind of complication?" "The FBI task force has received new information, false information, planted by a rival, suggesting you're more involved with my operation than previously thought." He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture of frustration. "They're planning to bring you in for questioning as soon as they locate you." "But I haven't done anything." Panic rose in my throat. "I can just tell them the truth, that I saw suspicious men and warned a customer. I didn't even know who you were." "The truth won't matter," he said softly. "They'll use you to get to me. They'll threaten charges, deportation for your mother, financial investigation into your sister's university funding. They'll apply pressure until you give them something, anything, they can use against me." Cold fear settled in my stomach. "So I'm trapped here?" "No," he said firmly. "I won't make you a prisoner, but I need to move you somewhere safer until this passes. Somewhere they won't look." "Where?" "I have a property in Malibu. Private, secure. You'd be comfortable there while my people handled this situation." "How long?" "A few weeks. A month at most." He moved closer, his eyes intent on mine. "I know this isn't what you wanted, Lily, but I promise I will keep you safe." I sank onto the edge of the bed, my mind racing. "And my family? Will they be safe? I've already increased security around them. Your mother's care facility now has 2 of my people on staff. Your sister's dormitory is being watched." His voice softened. "No one will touch them. You have my word." His word. The word of a criminal. And yet, strangely, I believed him. "When do we leave?" I asked, resignation in my voice. "Dawn." He hesitated, then sat beside me on the bed, keeping a careful distance between us. "Pack whatever you want from what I've provided. Anything else you need can be arranged." I nodded mutely, too overwhelmed to speak. We sat in silence for a long moment, the moonlight casting shadows across the room. "Why are you doing all this for me?" I finally asked, the question that had haunted me since that first night. The truth this time. He studied me, his amber eyes unreadable in the dim light. "Because from the moment you slid that napkin across the table, I knew you were different." His voice dropped lower. "Because when you look at me, you see Alexander, not just Volkov, not just the monster they've made me out to be. And if I'm not what you think, if I disappoint you, you won't," he said with a certainty that was both flattering and terrifying. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His fingers lingered at my cheek, warm against my skin. For a heartbeat, I thought he might kiss me. Part of me, a growing, insistent part, wanted him to. Instead, he stood, the moment broken. "Try to get some sleep. We leave at 5. He moved to the door, then paused, looking back at me. "Whatever happens, Lily, I will keep you safe. This I swear to you." After he left, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. I was being drawn deeper into his world, with each step forward making it harder to turn back. Yet even as fear and uncertainty churned within me, something else was taking root, a dangerous, inexplicable trust in a man the world called a monster. Dawn came too soon, gray light seeping through the windows as I packed the few belongings I'd accumulated during my stay. A soft knock at the door revealed Irina, her face as expressionless as ever. "Mr. Volkov is waiting," she said simply. I followed her through the quiet house to the garage, where Alexander stood beside a different car than the Bentley, a sleek black Range Rover with tinted windows. His eyes found mine immediately, concern evident in his gaze. "Did you sleep?" he asked as I approached. "Not much," I admitted. "You can rest on the drive." He opened the passenger door for me. "It's about 2 hours to Malibu." As I slid into the leather seat, I noticed the vehicle was empty except for us. "No driver today?" "I thought you might prefer privacy." He closed my door and moved around to the driver's side. The garage door opened silently, revealing the pink-tinged sky of early morning. As we pulled out onto the winding cliff road, I glanced back at the glass mansion that had been my luxurious prison for the past week. Ahead lay more uncertainty, deeper entanglement with a man who lived in a world of shadows. Yet as Alexander drove with confident ease, one hand on the wheel and his profile sharp against the rising sun, I couldn't ignore the flicker of anticipation beneath my fear. Whatever lay ahead, I was no longer just a bartender struggling to stay afloat. I was something else, something connected to this dangerous, complex man beside me. For better or worse, my life had irrevocably changed the moment I wrote those words on that napkin. "They know you're here. Run." The Malibu house was nothing like the modernist glass mansion we'd left behind. Nestled on a secluded stretch of coastline, it was a sprawling single story with weathered cedar siding and wide windows that captured the endless blue of the Pacific. More cottage than mansion, despite its obvious luxury. "It's beautiful," I said, as Alexander guided the Range Rover down a private drive lined with twisted cypress trees. "It was my mother's favorite place," he replied, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it before she died. The personal revelation caught me off guard. In all our conversations, Alexander had never mentioned his family. I'd assumed, like everything else about him, that his past was off limits. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. He nodded once, a barely perceptible acknowledgement, then pulled up to the front of the house where a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair waited on the porch. "Mrs. Kendrick?" Alexander greeted her as we exited the car. "Thank you for preparing the house on such short notice." "Of course, Mr. Volkov." Her eyes moved to me with undisguised curiosity. "Everything is ready as you requested." "This is Lily Chen," Alexander said, his hand coming to rest at the small of my back. "She'll be staying here for a while. Please ensure she has everything she needs." Mrs. Kendrick's eyes widened slightly, and I realized with a jolt that this was unusual, that Alexander didn't typically bring women to this particular retreat. "Of course, sir. Miss Chen, it's a pleasure to meet you." "Likewise," I managed, increasingly aware of the warmth of Alexander's hand through the thin material of my blouse. The interior of the house was a revelation, warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture, colorful textiles, and shelves lined with books and small treasures that spoke of a life well lived. It was the antithesis of the cold, minimalist palace we'd left behind. "This doesn't seem like your style," I observed, as Alexander led me through to a back deck that overlooked the ocean. "It isn't," he admitted. "My mother decorated it. I've never changed anything." He paused, gazing out at the waves. "She was an art professor before she met my father. Before everything changed. Again. That glimpse into a past I hadn't expected him to share. What happened to her?" For a moment, I thought I'd pushed too far. His jawline hardened, and his eyes grew distant. Then he sighed. "She died when I was 15. Cancer. My father." He trailed off, his hand tightening on the deck railing. "My father couldn't bear to look at this place afterward. Too many memories. So it became mine." "And your father?" I ventured, sensing there was more to the story. Alexander's eyes met mine, cold and hard as amber stones. "He was murdered 3 years later. A rival organization. I was 18. He said it matter-of-factly, but I could see the old pain beneath the practiced indifference. I inherited everything. His businesses, his enemies, his empire. At 18? That's, I struggled to find the right word, traumatic? Character building? A fucking tragedy?" His laugh was bitter. "All of the above, perhaps." I moved to stand beside him at the railing, close but not touching. "I'm sorry," I said again, inadequate words for the layers of loss he'd just revealed. "Don't be. It made me who I am." He turned to face me fully. For better or worse, there it was, the unspoken question that had hovered between us since our first meeting. Was he monster or man, criminal or victim of circumstance? The line blurred more with each revelation. "Mrs. Kendrick lives in the guest house down the path," Alexander continued, clearly wanting to change the subject. "She manages the property and will handle meals and anything else you need. There's a private beach accessible only from this property. You're free to use it, but don't venture beyond the property line markers." "More security concerns?" I asked. "Always." His phone buzzed, and he checked it with a frown. "I need to make some calls. Your room is through there." He gestured to a door off the main living area. "Make yourself comfortable. I shouldn't be long." He disappeared into what appeared to be a study, leaving me alone to explore my new gilded cage. The room he'd indicated was lovely, airy and bright, with a 4-poster bed draped in soft linens and a wall of windows that opened onto a private section of the deck. A vase of fresh wildflowers sat on the dresser, their scent filling the space with sweetness. I unpacked the few clothes I'd brought, then wandered back to the main living area, drawn to the bookshelves that lined one wall. Unlike the curated, untouched collection in his other home, these shelves held well-worn volumes, classics mixed with poetry, art books, and what appeared to be journals. I ran my fingers along the spines, wondering which had been touched by his mother's hands, which by his. One book caught my eye, a collection of Russian poetry with a faded silk bookmark protruding from its pages. I carefully pulled it from the shelf and opened it to the marked page. The poem was in Cyrillic, incomprehensible to me, but in the margin was a note written in delicate handwriting. For my Sasha, who carries the weight of worlds, remember to find beauty in small moments. Mama. Sasha, a diminutive of Alexander, a name from a time before he became Volkov, the feared criminal mastermind. That was her favorite. His voice came from behind me, making me jump. I hadn't heard him approach. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. It's all right. He moved closer, gently taking the book from my hands. She read this to me every night when I was young. Before we left Russia. Before my father's business took precedence over everything else. His finger traced the handwritten note. She called me Sasha, until the day she died. No one has called me that since. The vulnerability in his voice made my heart ache. What does the poem say? He looked at me for a long moment, then began to read in Russian, the words flowing like dark honey. When he finished, his eyes remained on the page. It's about finding light in darkness, he translated softly. About how even the smallest flame can guide you home through the longest night. Something shifted between us in that moment. A barrier falling, revealing the man beneath the carefully constructed facade of power and control. I reached out without thinking, my fingers brushing his. Thank you for sharing that, I said. His eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw something like longing in their depths. Then his phone buzzed again, breaking the moment. I have to go, he said, closing the book and returning it to its place on the shelf. Business in the city. I'll be back tomorrow. Disappointment washed through me, surprising in its intensity. Is everything okay? Nothing for you to worry about. His expression had closed again. The brief vulnerability tucked away behind his usual controlled mask. Mrs. Kendrick will check on you. The security team is stationed at the perimeter. You won't see them, but they're there. He turned to leave, then paused. Lily, he said without looking back, I'm sorry you've been drawn into this, into my world. Are you? I asked, not sure if I believed him. Now he did turn, his eyes searching my face. Yes and no. I regret the danger it's put you in. But I don't regret meeting you. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with the echo of his words and the lingering scent of his cologne. Days passed in a strange, dreamlike state. The Malibu house became a sanctuary of sorts, a beautiful prison with the endless Pacific as its most effective barrier. Mrs. Kendrick proved to be a quiet but kind presence, providing meals and conversation when I sought it. Discretion when I didn't. I spent hours walking the private beach, reading books from the shelves, and trying not to count the minutes until Alexander's return. He came back 3 days later, arriving as the sun was setting, casting the waves in shades of gold and crimson. I was on the deck, wrapped in a cashmere throw against the evening chill, when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel drive. I didn't move, waiting as his footsteps approached across the wooden deck. He stopped beside my chair, loosening his tie as he gazed out at the ocean. Beautiful, isn't it? He said quietly. Yes. I looked up at him, noting the shadows beneath his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. You look tired. A small smile touched his lips. Concerned about my welfare, Lily? Maybe. I gestured to the chair beside me. Sit. Tell me what's going on. He hesitated, then sank into the chair, running a hand through his hair. It's complicated. I have time, I said dryly. Plenty of it, in fact. That earned a genuine laugh, a rare sound that transformed his face. Fair enough. He leaned back, his posture relaxing slightly. The FBI task force has expanded their investigation. They've frozen several of my legitimate business accounts. They're pressuring my associates, threatening charges unless they cooperate. And have they? Cooperated? His eyes hardened. Some have tried. Others know better. I shivered, not entirely from the cool evening air. What happens to those who cooperate? That depends on what they share and how valuable they are to my operation. His voice was matter-of-fact, but I heard the dangerous edge beneath. Do you hurt them? I asked, needing to know despite fearing the answer. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. I do what's necessary to protect what's mine, he finally said. But I take no pleasure in it if that's what you're asking. It wasn't an answer. Not really. But it told me enough. This man, who shared poetry and childhood memories, was still the criminal the FBI sought. The man capable of violence, perhaps even murder. "Why tell me this?" I asked. "Aren't you worried I'll use it against you someday?" His gaze was steady. "You've had multiple opportunities to escape, to contact authorities. You haven't." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I've been under guard, constantly. Have you?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "The security team has orders to monitor the perimeter, not to prevent you from leaving. Your phone has been unrestricted since we arrived. There's a car in the garage with keys in the ignition. You could have left at any time." The revelation stunned me. I didn't know. "Precisely. You were testing me," I realized, anger flaring, seeing if I'd run. "I prefer to think of it as trusting you to make your own choice." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "And you chose to stay. Had I?" I hadn't even considered leaving. Had assumed I was as much a prisoner here as I'd been at his other home. But he was right. I hadn't tried to escape, hadn't even thought to check if the car in the garage had keys. "Why did you stay, Lily?" he asked softly. The question hung between us, demanding an answer I wasn't sure I had. Why had I stayed? Fear? Stockholm Syndrome? Or something more complicated, an attraction to this dangerous, complex man that I'd been denying even to myself? I don't know. I whispered. He reached out, his fingers grazing my cheek. "I think you do." His touch sent electricity through me, awakening feelings I'd been fighting since that first night at the bar. I should have pulled away. Instead, I leaned into his palm, my eyes closing briefly at the contact. "This is dangerous," I murmured. "Everything about me is dangerous," he agreed, his voice rough. "But I would never hurt you, Lily. You must believe that." And strangely, I did. Despite everything I knew about him, despite the criminal empire he commanded and the violence he was capable of, I believed that Alexander Volkov would never harm me. "I believe you," I said, opening my eyes to find his face closer than before, his gaze dropping to my lips. "May I?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the crash of waves below. In answer, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but quickly deepened as his hand slid to the back of my neck, drawing me closer. He tasted of expensive scotch, and something uniquely him, intoxicating in its intensity. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them, desire evident in their depths, but there was something else too, a vulnerability, a question. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his thumb tracing my lower lip. "Once we cross this line, Lily, there's no going back." I knew he was right. This wasn't just about physical attraction or the strange intimacy of our forced proximity. This was about choosing to align myself with him, with all that entailed. It was a dangerous precipice, and once stepped off, there would be no returning to the safe, mundane life I'd known before. "I'm sure," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I want this. I want you." His answering smile was both tender and predatory, a combination that sent heat pooling low in my belly. He stood, drawing me up with him, and led me inside, through the living room to my bedroom. At the threshold, he paused. "You can still change your mind," he said, his fingers entwined with mine. In answer, I pulled him into the room, closing the door behind us. What followed was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Alexander was both passionate and controlled, his hands and mouth exploring my body with a reverence that made me feel worshipped. He whispered my name like a prayer, his usual composure unraveling as we moved together in the darkness, illuminated only by moonlight streaming through the windows. Afterward, he held me against his chest, my head tucked beneath his chin, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. His body was a map of scars. Some I could identify as bullet wounds or knife cuts, others more mysterious. I traced them gently, each one a testament to the dangerous life he led. "What happens now?" I asked into the darkness, not sure if I meant in the immediate future or in the broader sense. His arms tightened around me. "Now you're mine to protect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I protect what's mine, Lily, with everything I have." The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a thrill through me, a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I'd been missing. "And what am I to you?" I dared to ask. "A distraction? A conquest?" He shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at me, his expression serious in the dim light. "You're the woman who saved my life with a napkin and 7 words. The woman who sees past the monster to the man beneath." His finger traced the line of my jaw. "You're becoming essential to me, Lily Chen. And that terrifies me more than any FBI task force." The raw honesty in his voice left me breathless. I reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight stubble along his jaw. "I'm scared too. We should be," he said with a wry smile. "This complicates everything. Do you regret it?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. "No," he said without hesitation. "Whatever comes, I won't regret this night." He kissed me again, more gently this time. "Try to sleep. We'll talk more in the morning." I drifted off in his arms, feeling safer than I had any right to in the embrace of a man the world called dangerous. The last thing I remembered before sleep claimed me was his lips against my hair, murmuring something in Russian that sounded like a promise. Morning light streamed through the windows when I woke, alone in the rumpled bed. For a moment I wondered if I'd dreamed the previous night, the confessions, the passion, the feeling of Alexander's arms around me as I drifted to sleep. Then I spotted the note on the pillow beside me, written in his precise handwriting. "Had to make some calls. Coffee on the deck." I smiled, tracing my finger over his initial. Such a normal, domestic gesture from a man whose world was anything but normal. After a quick shower, I dressed in a simple sundress from the wardrobe Alexander had provided and made my way to the deck. He was there, as promised, seated at the small table with 2 cups of coffee and a plate of pastries. He wore only dark trousers and a white shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, his usual perfect tailoring replaced by something more casual, more intimate. He rose as I approached, his eyes warming as they took me in. "Good morning," he said, pulling out a chair for me. "Good morning." I sat, suddenly shy despite the intimacies we'd shared just hours before. "You're up early." "Business never sleeps." He handed me a cup of coffee, prepared exactly as I preferred it. "How did you rest?" "Well," I said, a blush heating my cheeks as memories of the previous night flooded back. "Very well." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Good." We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the crash of waves below and the occasional cry of seagulls. It felt surreal, this peaceful domestic scene with a man who commanded a criminal empire. "We need to talk about what happens next," Alexander finally said, setting down his coffee cup. My stomach tightened. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous. Practical." He reached across the table to take my hand. "My feelings for you don't change the reality of my life, Lily. The FBI investigation is intensifying. My rivals sense weakness and are moving to exploit it. It's becoming increasingly dangerous to be associated with me. I'm already associated with you," I pointed out. "I have been since that night at the bar." "Yes, but last night changed things." His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. "Before, you were a bystander, caught in circumstances beyond your control. Now I've made a choice," I finished for him. He nodded, his expression solemn. "And that choice has consequences." Fear curled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. "Tell me." Alexander sighed, running his free hand through his hair. "I've built my life around walls, Lily. Compartments. Nothing and no one overlaps. It's how I've survived, how I've protected the few people I care about. And now I've breached those walls," I said quietly. "In ways I never anticipated." His eyes held mine, intense and searching. "I can't change who I am or what I do, but I can offer you protection, security. I can ensure your family is taken care of, that you want for nothing." "In exchange for what?" I asked, echoing the question I'd posed days earlier in his study. "In exchange for accepting the limitations of loving a man like me," he said simply. "Limited time, limited freedom, limited safety. Loving. The word hung between us, unacknowledged but present. Was that what this was? This pull? This connection that defied logic and self-preservation? What about my life? I asked. My job, my apartment, my friends? You can return to them, if that's what you want. The bar management position at the Ivory Room is still yours if you desire it. He hesitated. But you would need to be careful, discreet about our relationship. And you would always have security. Men watching over you, whether you see them or not. A gilded cage, I murmured. A protected life, he countered. With as much freedom as I can safely give you. I pulled my hand from his, rising to move to the railing. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, wild and free in ways I suddenly feared I might never be again. And if I can't accept those limitations? I asked without turning. If I want more than stolen moments and shadows? I heard him rise, felt his presence behind me, though he didn't touch me. Then I would let you go, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I would ensure you and your family were financially secure for life. I would make certain the FBI understood you were never involved in my business, and I would never contact you again. The thought of never seeing him again sent a physical pain through my chest. I turned to face him. Is there no middle ground? No way for you to, I don't know, go legitimate? A sad smile touched his lips. I've been in this life since I was 18, Lily. The legitimate businesses I own are built on a foundation of blood and violence. I have enemies who would never let me walk away. Rivals who would see any attempt to go clean as weakness to be exploited. He shook his head. There is no retirement plan for men like me. Then what future can we have? I asked, blinking back unexpected tears. He reached up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. A complicated one. A dangerous one. But one with moments of beauty and passion that most people never experience. His eyes held mine. I can't promise you safety or normalcy, Lily, but I can promise you will never be bored. Never be unloved. Never want for anything I have the power to give you. Unloved. There it was again. That word that changed everything. Do you love me, Alexander? I asked, needing to hear him say it. He was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes searching mine. I didn't believe I was capable of love anymore. He finally said, not after everything I've done, everything I've become, but what I feel for you. He took a deep breath. Yes, Lily, I love you. God help us both, but I do. I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. It was madness. Falling in love with a criminal, a man who lived in shadows and danger. But in the short time I'd known him, Alexander had shown me more of himself, more honesty and vulnerability, than anyone else in my life. I love you too, I whispered, the truth of it settling into my bones, even as I spoke the words. And it terrifies me. His arms encircled me, pulling me against his chest. It should. He murmured into my hair, loving me is the most dangerous thing you'll ever do. We stood like that for a long moment, the sound of waves filling the silence between us. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket, the intrusion of reality into our private world. He checked it with a frown, his expression darkening. I need to make a call, he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. I'll be back shortly. I watched him stride back into the house, already sensing the change in him, the lover becoming the commander once again, shoulders straightening, jaw setting in hard lines. This was the reality of loving Alexander Volkov, these transitions, these compartments in his life that I would never fully penetrate. Could I live with that? With being kept separate from parts of him, with the knowledge of what he was capable of, with the constant danger, the secrecy, the limitations. I turned back to the ocean, searching for answers in its endless blue. My old life seemed impossibly distant now, the struggling bartender with crushing debt and fading dreams. Alexander offered security, passion, a kind of fierce love I'd never experienced before, but at what cost to my soul? I was still standing there when he returned nearly an hour later, his face grim, all traces of the tender lover erased by whatever business had required his attention. What's wrong? I asked, instantly alert to the tension radiating from him. We need to leave, he said, already moving toward the door. Now. Pack only what you need. Fear shot through me. What happened? He paused, conflict evident in his expression. the desire to protect me from knowledge warring with the need to be honest. One of my associates has been compromised. He gave the FBI information about this property. They're coming here? Panic rose in my throat. Not yet, but soon. We have perhaps an hour. He moved to me, gripping my shoulders gently but firmly. Lily, listen to me carefully. This changes things. I need to disappear for a while. Go underground until this blows over. And me? I asked, already knowing the answer. Pain flickered across his face. You need to make a choice. Right now. Come with me. Knowing that where I'm going there's no turning back. Or let me set you up somewhere safe, somewhere disconnected from me, where you can rebuild your life. Without you, I said, the words hollow in my chest. It would be safer for you, he admitted. The FBI would eventually lose interest if you have no connection to me. Your life could return to normal. Normal. The word had lost all meaning. How could I return to pouring drinks and counting tips after everything I'd experienced? How could I pretend Alexander Volkov had never existed, had never held me, loved me? How long would you be gone? I asked, searching for a third option, a compromise. Months, maybe longer. His hands tightened on my shoulders, and when, if I returned, things would be different. I would be different. More dangerous, I said, understanding dawning. You'd have to eliminate threats, reassert control. His silence was answer enough. If I came with you, I pressed, what would that mean? What would my life be? Shadows, he said honestly. Different names, different cities, limited contact with your family, always looking over your shoulder. His eyes held mine, but you would be with me, protected, loved. It was an impossible choice, safety without him or danger at his side. Yet even as I contemplated it, I knew my heart had already decided. Perhaps it had decided that first night when I slid a napkin across a table to a dangerous stranger. I need to call my sister, I said, and arrange for my mother's care. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Lily. I'm coming with you, I said, cutting him off. I chose you that night at the bar when I wrote that warning. I've been choosing you every day since, whether I admitted it to myself or not. Relief and concern warred in his expression. You understand what you're giving up? I understand what I'm gaining, I countered. You, us, whatever that means, whatever it costs. He pulled me to him then, his kiss desperate and promising at once. I will keep you safe, he murmured against my lips. I will make this worth the sacrifice. I know, I said, and in that moment, I did know. With a certainty that defied logic or reason, whatever darkness lay in Alexander's world, whatever danger we faced, we would face it together. We packed quickly, taking only essentials. Alexander made calls, his voice shifting between languages as he arranged our escape. I called my sister, telling her only that I was taking a job overseas, that I would be in touch when I could. Alexander transferred funds to an account in her name, enough to cover our mother's care for years to come, enough that she would never have to worry about money again. As we prepared to leave, Mrs. Kendrick appeared, her face calm despite the obvious urgency of our departure. The helicopter will be here in 20 minutes, Mr. Volkov, she said, handing him a small duffel bag. Everything you requested is inside. Thank you, Elena, he replied, using her first name for the first time in my hearing. You know what to do? She nodded once. Of course. Safe travels. Her eyes moved to me, something like approval in their depths. Take care of him, Miss Chen. He needs someone who sees him clearly. Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me to wonder about her relationship to Alexander. Clearly more than just a housekeeper, perhaps a link to his mother or his past. The helicopter arrived exactly when promised, landing on the property's small helipad. As we approached, Alexander's hand firm around mine, he leaned close to speak over the roar of the rotors. Last chance to change your mind, he said, his eyes searching mine for any doubt. In answer, I pulled him down for a fierce kiss, pouring all my certainty and love into it. When we broke apart, his smile was both tender and dangerous, the perfect encapsulation of the man himself. We boarded the helicopter, strapping in side by side as the pilot, another of Alexander's seemingly endless supply of loyal employees, prepared for takeoff. As we rose into the air, I watched the Malibu house grow smaller below us, the Pacific stretching endlessly beyond. I was leaving behind everything I'd known, everything safe and predictable, for a life of shadows and danger with a man the world called a monster. But as Alexander's hand found mine, his thumb tracing circles on my palm in that now familiar gesture, I felt no regret, only a strange sense of coming home, of finding where I belonged. Perhaps I had always been meant for shadows rather than light, for complexity rather than simplicity. Perhaps Alexander and I were two broken pieces that somehow fit perfectly together. "Where are we going?" I asked, leaning close to be heard over the helicopter's noise. "First, to a private airfield. Then Switzerland, for a while at least." His eyes held mine. "After that, wherever is safest, together," I said, not a question, but an affirmation. His smile transformed his face. The dangerous criminal momentarily replaced by the man who had read Russian poetry by moonlight, who had whispered love against my skin. "Together," he agreed, raising my hand to his lips, "always." As the helicopter banked toward the mountains, leaving the coast behind, I thought about the napkin that had started it all. 7 words that had changed the course of both our lives. "They know you're here. Run." A warning that had become an invitation, a beginning rather than an end. I had been running from something all my life: poverty, failure, the crushing weight of responsibility. Now I was running toward something instead. Toward love. Toward a future both terrifying and exhilarating in its unpredictability. Alexander's arm wrapped around my shoulders, drawing me closer against his side. I rested my head on his shoulder, closing my eyes as the helicopter carried us away from our old lives and toward something new, something dangerous, something ours. Whatever came next. FBI investigations, rival organizations, the shadows of Alexander's world. We would face it together. I had made my choice, crossed the line from bystander to accomplice, from stranger to lover. There was no going back, only forward into the beautiful darkness we would navigate together. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free, not despite the danger and constraints of loving Alexander Volkov, but because of them. In choosing him, I had chosen myself, the woman strong enough to stand beside a dangerous man, to love him despite his darkness, perhaps even because of it. As the helicopter flew higher, leaving the past behind, I felt Alexander's lips brush my temple, his voice soft against my ear. "Ja lubię ciebie, moja Lili. Vzegda." I love you, my Lily. Always. I didn't need to understand the words to feel their truth, their promise. In that moment, speeding toward an uncertain future with a man who commanded both fear and loyalty, I knew with perfect clarity that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The bartender who had written a warning on a napkin was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her strength in the most unexpected place, in the arms of a man the world called dangerous, but who had shown me parts of himself no one else had ever seen. "I love you too," I whispered back, the words carried away by the roar of the rotors, but felt in the tightening of his arm around me, in the press of his lips against my hair. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The bartender and the Mafia boss, bound by a napkin, by danger, by love. It wasn't a conventional happily ever after, but it was ours. And for now, for always, that was enough.